Hello, everybody. Hope you had a great Melbourne Cup day. We decided we could hat it tonight. So my guests on Thriving Matters Studio for our Education Matters conversation are the beautiful, beautiful orange lass down the end there, Helen McDonald. How are you, Helen?
I'm fabulous, Carrie. Happy Cup Day.
Happy Cup Day to you. And, of course, the rose between the thorns is none other than Maurizio Vespa. So, Maurizio.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ladies, welcome.
Cheers, everybody.
Very colourful. I'm a bit plain in the middle, actually, but you're definitely very colourful. Ready for the World Cup.
You're fine. Now, I can tell you all that this is pretty non-alcoholic. I've got soda and lemon. I think, Helen, what have you got in yours?
I've got water.
Very good. We're all hydrating.
High flyers here.
Mine's water. I mean, I did bring along a little espresso just in case.
Oh, just in case you need that hit of caffeine, hey? All right. We thought we'd have a little bit of fun. It's Melbourne Cup night, but more importantly, love and wishes to everyone in Melbourne and Victoria. It's a very strange watching an international horse race with nobody in the stands. So this has been a year of firsts, and we also have a great conversation for you installed tonight. So we've just introduced Helen and Maurizio. So let's do a little bit about, and Maurizio, I'm going to start from the other end. So introducing Helen to you all. As you know, Thriving Matters Studio came out of a COVID response this year, where we're talking about what it is that we're looking and have been noticing about education, the way we are forming the minds and curiosity and all those beautiful things around education for our young people, what it is that we're noticing about our teachers, the way they have been absolutely amazing in their response to the pandemic, but more importantly, what's the future going to be like? So our conversation tonight, listeners, is all about optimising the best outcomes. So let's tell you a little bit about Helen. Helen Mack has just got her business back on track after a very tough 6 years of her life when COVID hit this year. So, and you can see her vibrancy is right there in front of us. So we're going to find out about that tonight. You know, the principles that got her through the illness of her husband and his death after 30 years are pretty amazing, Helen. And I've got to say, what comes to mind is grit and gumption, girl. Two old-fashioned terms that we often hear. But it's been a fundamental skill and a fundamental way that she's helped to reinvent herself. So we're hearing about something new in her business relationships, and she's got an interesting project that she's brought back to life, the Great Trentham Spud Fest. So we just might be a little bit curious and ask about that. She now brings business owners together to connect and collaborate so they can optimise their outcomes. So I thought, hello, Helen, I thought, what a great pairing with Maurizio. So Maurizio has been in education for a significant amount of his working life, proven experience in management, leadership, consultancy, conflict resolution, not-for-profits. More importantly, he has a passion around restorative practices and the psychology behind that, and looking at young people, the effects of trauma, the effects on their learning. So I think we have a great pairing tonight. So guys, say something, say hi, and just add something about yourself that I haven't done, because you're going to do it much better than I am.
Well, Carrie, seeing as how you introduced me first, the thing for me about this conversation is that I think that education is a critical piece for us going forward. Not only have the teachers done and schools done an amazing job of supporting the kids, but I think a lot of parents have understood more about what the teachers and principals and all of the education support processes do on a year-by-year basis. And so I'm really hoping that one of the outcomes from this pandemic is more support, in a way, from some of the parents who perhaps thought that they could just kind of hand their kids over and that the education system would look after them in its entirety. So I'm really very optimistic, funnily enough, that tends to be my approach, about the positive impact of this scenario, both on the teachers and educators in general who've had to learn some different ways of doing things, and also on the parents who perhaps understand a bit more about what their children really need in education.
Thank you, Helen. And we're going to come back to that word optimistic and, you know, how we could actually just shift that a little bit as well. So it's going to be interesting because I have a friend who says to me, but Carrie, you're an optimist. And she goes, and I'm a realist. So I actually think that is a great conversation to have about how we view somebody else's attitude or the way that they show up. So Maurizio, I just love that cap there. You're really into the English racing carnival, aren't you? Really?
Well, I could be riding a horse, but unfortunately, I'm standing up. I'm upright tonight. Yeah, but I would agree with what Helen was saying. I think in the last 8 months we've learned a lot about ourselves, how we work. I think we've learned a lot about the impact of isolation. And I think the critical factor that's come out of it is the fact that, you know, learning is ongoing, and therefore there's a greater need now for even ourselves, even as adults, for us to ensure that we are expanding our learning at the same time. So whilst we're doing it with young kids and teenagers, we need to also think about ourselves, because the nature of work is changing, employment is changing, how people are working is changing, and we can no longer say, well, this is how we used to do it. We've now been placed in a situation where it's opened up a lot of ways of how we can do things. So I think there's been some really, really wonderful positives that have come out of a very impactful situation.
Well, we're starting to see government response to the effect of people's wellbeing and employment opportunities. We'll have JobKeeper coming off around March next year. There's a whole lot of things that are impacting, and as we go forward over the Christmas break and the holiday break for our educators, you know, there'll be a lot of contemplation, but we'll have a lot of people looking at, okay, here are my skills. How can I actually use them and still continue to learn and adapt to a new challenge? So yeah, I think that idea of whether you're an optimist or a realist, I think that's defunct, because I think what really matters, and I'm going to open this up, is what the outcomes are of the way we see the world or how we interact in our relationships, what are those skills that we need. So let's move on to this word optimism, and how Helen, you've got a particular view on optimism, and that's your real sweet spot where you work. So tell us a little bit about this notion of optimism. What would you like us to think about it as?
One of the things I'd like to educate your friend about is that optimism, what I call functional optimism, has a very strong connection to reality. And the way that I express optimism or teach optimism to my clients is that it's not about everything's wonderful in the world. It's a very realistic, grounded approach that looks at what's happening now, what would I like to happen, what is possible in this scenario, and then what's the best possible outcome. So optimism is the missing scenario in positive thinking. So the bit that's missing from positive thinking is the action imperative. And optimism has a built-in action imperative by the very definition of the word. So the optimism, the word, comes from the Latin optimus, which is the search for good. And the search for good implies that you're looking for best possible outcomes. And to get the best possible outcome, you have to start with a reality check. So when your friend next has a go at you for being an optimist and she's a realist, you say, yeah, that's fabulous. My optimism includes a first step, which is a reality check, because there's no point in heading off into the wide blue yonder going, la, 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 everything's going to be fine, without checking where you are first.
And Maurizio, I would imagine that in the work that you've been doing with students around restorative practices, that's exactly what the basis of those practices are. Would I be wrong?
No. I was just about to say that there's a wonderful synergy between what Helen was saying about optimism and it's about the actions and moving forward. It's not just about the thought; it's about the actual doing. And in restorative practices, the reality is that conflict will occur in the workplace. It will occur amongst people. We're in a relational environment constantly, so conflict is inevitable. So what we want to try and do is we want to try and turn those negative moments into positive outcomes. So it's about having a plan. So what are the actions? How do I go about repairing any hurt that may have happened through, an inappropriate decision or an action or whatever? So it's then about bringing people together because, even in your work, Kerry, you talk about, heart-centered leadership and relationships are really critical. So restorative practices builds on that concept of trying to remain connected, and if that connection is broken, how can we? What's the process? What are the steps?
Yeah, I love that distinction, Maurizo, between positive outcomes and positive actions, which are different to positive thinking. So positive thinking is thinking everything's going to be okay. Without positive action towards the positive outcome, then it's just a feel-good factor. We need to do something. Relationships are not going to heal themselves. Conflict is not going to be resolved just by hoping. Hope is not a strategy. You need to do something.
No, I agree. Totally.
Yeah. So would you classify these as capabilities or competencies that we're moving towards because what we've been living through has affected us emotionally, affected our relationships, affected the way we've responded to each other under stress? You think that's a fair?
Where would you fit restorative practices in that model, Maurizo?
Well, in restorative practices, I always say that, as I said, relationships are critical. And I think the current situation that we have experienced and are still experiencing by all means highlights the importance of how critical it is for us to remain connected, having networks. In fact, tapping into coaching mentors who will bring us often out of that isolation and give us also some creative ideas, ways of moving forward. If I feel stuck and I don't have the actions, then sometimes bouncing it off somebody can give me those actions. Now, I guess there's that wonderful African saying, Ubuntu. Yes. I am because of who we are. I exist. I become fully human when I am in connection. So when relationships break down, we need to repair them. When professional relationships break down, we need to repair them. And sometimes we need experts, professionals like yourselves, that help us in what's the process? What are the steps? How do I go about this? Help me plan this out.
And I think the other piece, what you tap into there in terms of Carrie's question about, what are the capabilities, competencies, skills that people are going to need going forward, whether they are deeply embedded in education in the sense of, students, teachers, principals, and so on, or whether they are leaders in education, in adult learning, in the corporate sense, wherever they are. One of the competencies and capabilities is exactly what you're talking about, Maurizo, the ability to connect, the ability to maintain and build relationships, and the ability to repair those relationships when they get lost or get off track. I think the other piece that has been shown is this idea of optimism, resilience, and ability to keep lifting yourself through tough times. We're not out the other end of this thing yet, and there are still challenges. You look internationally, my heart is just breaking for Europe and England and Europe at the moment, Britain and Europe at the moment, with what they're going through. We are starting to lift ourselves up. And one of the things that I think, one of the skill sets that we've learned or have been forced into learning is around the optimism, resilience, and learning about your strengths. And very importantly, and you touched on this before, Maurizo, reaching out when you're struggling, whether that's whether you're struggling with a relationship, with some kind of connection, or just with getting by when things are tough, that we don't have to do this alone. In fact, it's much better if we don't.
Yeah, I was listening to something earlier this week, and it was just talking about we don't have to change everything if in the way we react or think. If we just change 1%. of a way that we think about something or we do it, it can often make a difference. It's that small. So we talk about small steps. So for our young people, a small step, for our parents, for our teachers, for our educational leaders, wherever they are, whether they're in businesses, in corporations, organisations, whether they're in schools, or our traditional view of education is that it belongs in schools, when in actual fact now we're learning across all social media platforms. We're learning through a variety of ways. So it's that little 1% that we can change that I think is one of those little gems that we can just store, can level us and calm us into thinking more broadly. So broaden out our thinking, as Barbara Fredrickson would have you.
One of the lovely things about that, Carrie, is that it gives you permission to not have to decide on a big step.
Yes.
So one of the things that I teach is that any direction is better than none. And even a baby step will get you into momentum. And once you're in momentum, then the universe will give, depending on what your belief system is, the universe will give you feedback. It'll either say, good job, take another one. It'll go, whoa, no, don't do that. Either way, take a baby step, look for feedback. How did that feel? Did that work? Get the response? And then take another one. You don't have to leap forward. You can actually just step one tiny wee step at a time. I'm guessing that in restorative practice, that's also true, Maurizio.
Well, I mean, I was just trying to listen and tap into things that both of you have actually said. So, and I agree with you that 1% of change really makes a difference. You know, in conversation with my wife, she often says, if we as adults make a slight change to how we behave, we will have a huge impact on how our own children will respond and behave in situations. So kids are going to be very aware of how adults are responding to the current situation. So if we make a small adjustment, we actually show that we're learning new things, and we have to, because, you know, we've been forced into a real technological sort of space at the moment. So we need not only the technology in terms of hardware, but we also need the resources. And the resources isn't just software. The resources are actually people who can actually share with us their learnings about how we use things. The classroom, for example, I mean, we still have classrooms that in some cases are a little bit medieval in terms of how we set them up. So we now have to think about how do we bring learning to today's child who has the internet exposed to them. You know, how do we provide them with career readiness? Because that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about careers, and they're concerned about holistic development, and that's emotional intelligence as well as, you know, intellectual intelligence. You know, having the skills to do things. So there's a lot we can talk about here. This is a wonderful sort of, you know,
and a bit of a mixing pot, isn't it?
The thing that you're talking about, Maurizio, is also true that we now have in Australia, we have a group of children, particularly in Victoria where I'm living, we have a group of school children, some of whom have spent half of this year not in the classroom. So for the education system to go, oh, that's okay, we'll just throw them back into the classrooms like they were before, there's going to be challenges for kids who go, why do I have to sit at this desk in this corner and do this thing at the same time as everyone else? I think that's what I was talking about before. I think we've got a great opportunity and more software than we've ever had before in terms of computer work. What we need to make sure is we're using the software inside our skulls to get the possible outcome for people.
No, very true.
Well, the learning design is critical, isn't it? And that's it comes down, no matter what we do, the design of the learning is needs to be considered. Maurizio, I was going to ask you, can you give us a little snapshot of what a restorative practice might look like? We've got a whole audience here. We've got some parents. We've probably got some teachers. Most teachers would probably know about restorative practices, but there'd be others who don't. So I was thinking this was a good opportunity because we would have some people who don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, in a nutshell, it's all about repairing relationship when there's been hurt or damage. So a critical part of restorative practices is the language and the tonality and the dialogue. It's all about dialogue, and it's about reflective dialogue rather than interrogative dialogue. Okay. So it's about a discussion. So when things fall off the wagon, it's about sitting down and saying, well, let's talk about what's happened, and how's it affected people? How's it affected you? What can we do to make the situation better? And when we ask those kind of questions like, what can we do to make the situation better? How do we repair this? Then it's about also the adult being, how can I say, the wise person who can actually share some strategies and some skills so that the child goes away with some tools. And then it's also about having a conversation around, well, if you find yourself in the same situation in the future, what could you do differently? You know, you responded in this way out of anger. When you feel angry, what is it that you could do? Who can you go and talk to? Who can you connect with? So it's wonderful with students, but it has great applications also in the workplace. You know, rather than being a boss that actually chastises your employee, sit down. You know, let's work things out, because it's quite possible that they may not have known how to do something. Here's a great opportunity for a teachable moment for child, adult, great relationships, and you can actually build up people's skills.
And when you've got role models, your leaders, or the workplace that you have, or the school that you have, where you know the lead, that's how the leaders behave fairly regularly, you know, that becomes the way that your culture builds. And that becomes how you're known for caring and respecting and connecting with people. So your relationships are rich, and any issues, you've got the processes to be able to use to help support them.
Nice.
Yeah. So you, Maurizio, over the years, you'd have a fair bit of experience working with young people and with adults. Have you been noticing anything this year that you would say we need to really take notice of? Because we've been in a very different situation.
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on it earlier. I think Helen also mentioned it as well about, you know, about having a plan, having an action, being able to do something. And I think that's really important. As I said, I think we've learnt that as human beings, we are hardwired to connect. So connection is important. So, and building the networks is wonderful, and being open to learning is really critical. And even, you know, upskilling ourselves. You know, I mean, there are things that I'm having to learn all the time because of the environment where I have to. And not only do I have to, but I need to, because it allows me to still remain connected to my networks, and it allows me to remain connected to technology and advances and so on. So it helps my work, helps my social, you know. But I would sort of follow on with what Helen was saying. You know, it's critical to have a plan, you know, and something that's tangible, that's realistic, practical, and, you know, can be achieved.
So I think we're really talking about essential skills that are future focused, because that's what you're talking about. You know, how can we apply these to the next incident, or how we interact with others? So we're looking at future focus. So Helen, I was going to say to you, have you got some strategies around optimising the outcomes that we're doing, whether we're a young person, whether we're an adult, that we can optimise the best relationships for the workplace? I mean, that's very general, so I'm putting you right on the spot, but you've probably got some really dynamic little strategies that can be useful. Would you like to share some of those?
Sure. I think the future focus piece is critical, Carrie, and I love that that's where your focus is, that we need to not repeat the past. We need to be looking at what's going to take us forward. I think in terms of, if I was to look at optimizing outcomes for relationships, I think I have three main principles that I teach, regardless of whether it's for a task or for a group of people or for a relationship. Yep. And the first, so it's clarity, momentum, and mindset. And the clarity piece is whatever, and this taps into what Maurizio has been talking about, if you want to improve a relationship or an outcome, get really clear about what it is that you want, and make sure that all the parties involved, so if it's two people in a relationship or a group of people in a team, that everyone's crystal clear about your expectations and about what they might need to do, the action they might need to take to get the outcome. So there's a whole heap of stuff around clarity, but if whenever you approach a task, you're looking at what's the outcome that I want, get crystal clear about that, then everything else will sort of support your movement forward with that clarity as your first step. The second piece is momentum, and that's going back to our baby steps or our tiny little changes, because if we can get into momentum in the direction with which we want to end up, the optimized outcome, the ultimate outcome, then again, whether it's fixing a relationship, if all you can do in the first conversation is improve it a tiny bit so that the next conversation is a little bit better. So maintain the momentum. And if you're trying to heal a relationship, or if you're trying to fix a team, or if you're trying to get something done, taking advantage of that, maintaining that momentum. The universe rewards movement. If you're stagnant, it's really hard to make any movement in any direction. So regardless of how successful the first baby attempt was, work on that, build on that, and keep moving forward. And then the third piece is mindset, which is around, of course, taking an optimistic approach to everything and maximizing the outcomes by maintaining your mindset. And there are numerous ways in which you can do this. One of the things to think about at the moment, for depending on where you are in Australia, and perhaps around the world, your ability to use the usual mindset techniques may be being impacted by restrictions that operate in your world. So in Australia, if you're in Queensland or New South Wales or Victoria or WA or SA, or wherever you are in Australia, the limitations that you have on the things that you can do vary. So some of us in Victoria, for example, are going to need to be a little more creative about the way that we maintain our mindset. Our connections might need to be more virtual. You know, we have these lovely virtual presentations, Carrie, that you invited us to tonight. You can apply the same principles to your one-to-one relationships, to your relationships with other couples. Over the restriction time in Victoria, I've had Zoom birthday parties, Zoom dinner parties, Zoom cocktail parties, and I even got married in the pandemic on Zoom. So we need to make sure in maintaining our mindset that we don't allow external restrictions to impact on our ability to keep ourselves uplifted, and there's a number of things you can do to do that. I'm always very happy to share with people. So if any of your friends or listeners need some help with that, by all means, seek me out. I'm more than happy to share with you a lot of my ideas.
And as at the end of each session, we always share our details if you'd like to get in contact with either Helen or Maurizio for their areas of expertise, because they're very generous in being part of the conversation tonight. You know, I couldn't help but thinking, as you both of you were talking, that these really are the skills, part of the package of skills that we need for a future that's totally uncertain at the moment. We've now got another, as of Thursday, London will be closed down again. We have an election imminent in the United States. And do you know today that the betting market in Australia, the figures, their statistics on how many people have been betting on the Melbourne Cup today, which usually is massive. The statistics are that there has been more money put on the American election outcome than there was on the Melbourne Cup today.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was fascinated by that.
There was something I read earlier today that the Melbourne Cup is the race that stops the nation, and I still think it's hilarious that we have a holiday for it in Victoria. Anyway, but the race on the other side of the world, the one that's going to be decided effectively tomorrow, our time, is actually a race that is really going to have an impact across the globe. And so I'm unsurprised that people are, given that Australians do have a bit of a habit of being happy to bet on two flies running up a wall, it's no surprise to me that we're betting. And wouldn't it be great if somehow we could create a force that helped us get an outcome that's going to benefit the planet? I think everyone in education and in all parts of the world are looking at America at the moment and thinking, well, wow, what's the outcome going to be? I'm fairly sure that we're not going to know tomorrow, but we'll see. The other thing I read today was this whole, you're asking, Carrie, about, what are the skills of the future? If we go way, way back, there was a misquote of Darwin that he said, the survival of the fittest. He didn't. What he talked about was that the species that is most likely to survive is the one that has the greatest ability to adapt and adjust to their changing environment.
Exactly.
And I think of all the skills that we're talking about, the ones that Maurizio is talking about in terms of repairing relationships, the things that I talk about optimizing outcomes, it's about adjusting. And if we could teach the children who are coming through the education system just one thing, and that is that change happens, and that your ability to adjust, adapt, and make that change fit into your life, that's the skill that we need more than anything else as we go forward.
And I agree with you. I think young people are actually looking at how adults are currently responding to the situation that we're in. And to give some really good credit to teachers, I think teachers have done a remarkable, school leaders and, in general, organisations have done a really wonderful job to manage the situation. I mean, it's always been seamless. And I know people have lost jobs though, and I know that there's some insecurities. But, when we're talking about, if we're going to talk about education, I think teachers have done a really remarkable job. They're innovative. I certainly see a lot of networking taking place, a lot of shared resources, which I think is fantastic. And I actually think that they're really looking at what's the classroom looking like now. And I think they have a very different perception of the classroom. So it'll be interesting to see how they bring about the change to what learning is going to be like in the future. And I think that'll be fantastic. So, I've been out of the classroom for 20 years now, but my connection to the classroom is, setting up schools for kids with mental health and so on, and or youth and family counselling focuses. But, they're there. They're in the day-to-day stuff, so they know what's needed, what the trend is. What we cannot overlook, though, is we must make sure, though, that it's equitable, that the kids who are in that lower socioeconomic sort of area are able to have access to the resources. So that's laptops, computers, the internet, because that's going to stop them from engaging. And in fact, there's a study that shows that kids from lower economic backgrounds are less likely to find online learning as effective as those who are actually coming from higher, how can I say, socioeconomic sort of background. So it's really quite interesting.
They have less access, don't they, to both the up-to-date equipment and the endless broadband and all that sort of thing. I have a friend who's part of his business is he runs a broadband service, and part of his business is philanthropically providing internet to families who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. And I just love that concept. And I think you're right. The two things that I love about what you just said, Maurizio, one is, oh my goodness, haven't the teachers done the most amazing job of adapting? I've got a number of mates who are still in the teaching, and they have worked so hard to keep their students connected and engaged and learning in this incredibly difficult environment. Praise also to a lot of the parents that I know who have just done the most remarkable things to create an environment where their kids are able to pay attention and learn, and supporting them, in the breaks by making sure they stretch and move and all of those sorts of things. And then the other piece is that we really do need to make sure that we are continually applying pressure to the people who are making decisions about allocation of resources, to make sure that both the principals, the teachers, all of the other people in the education system, and the parents and students are supported with the resources they need and the infrastructure that they need going forward.
Agree.
Well, that's a great segue, because I was just I was thinking through, and I'm thinking, leadership shouldn't be seen, if we're leading communities, it shouldn't be seen as a political exercise, even though it is highly political in the way that we've set this up. So if we go back to the values, beliefs and assumptions that underpin leadership, it's not an it, it's actually about the relationship. It's about how you work through the demands, the challenges of the role, of the job, of the people that you're working with, and you actually catch yourself doing a bit of action research at the same time, because it's like we're living in a case study each time we move into something new, or we have a different situation that we've always, from what we are used to, and we have to find new ways to respond to that. So I think we really need to take into account who's in the conversation about the future of education, how it's going to go, because I have a feeling that globally around the world, there are various ways now that education is accessed by huge populations of people, huge numbers of students, and not all of them have money to pay for school fees. So they are accessing education through other methods. There's a report out that I came across by IDEO that was released in August 2020 this year, and it talks scenarios. And one of the scenarios is about the different types of community education that are already in play, where you've got community members who are all ages who will come in and do volunteer education. That you've got kids learning music outside of a school, a school situation as we know it here in Australia. It's the community that does it. There's a roster system for various things. I mean, there's just some amazing things going on. And I think we've all got stories of generosity and philanthropic interest and outreach as well during this time that our education communities have been watching, have been experiencing as well.
Yeah, so that, Carrie, is that it's what I said before, is that we need to learn to ask, and I think the schools also need to learn to reach outside their fences and look for the people in the community who won't step forward because they don't feel they should, could, whatever, and have a look at some of the groups in the community. The primary school just up the road from me has started taking advantage of the aged care facility that is just across the road to help with reading practice. So some of the elderly there, they're not infirm, they're just unable to look after themselves at home 100%. So, you know, helping the kids with reading practice, a single teacher, that's really, really hard. A bunch of seniors who have, you need to choose the patient ones, but will happily sit and listen to kids read. Schools need to continue to reach out like they have had to do through the pandemic. Oh my goodness, all our parents are going to have to help us. When the schools and education system needs to remember to keep asking their community, because there are some very generous souls out there.
Yeah, we're very we're used to being in our place, having a role, having a label, having a place where something's done. And I think that's been blown apart because, you know, there's that beautiful quote, you know, the whole village educates the child. And I think we've had a tip round, and a number of other conversations on a Tuesday night have actually acknowledged that there's been a whole tip of community. And really that's what, when we look at what's really taking up people's hearts and their passions at the moment and their desires for a better world, it's around respect, equity, you know, diversity of opinion, you know, being able to come together. So we've got some great ideas, and I think the minds of our young people are concerned with exactly that. You have to listen. One of my grandsons, 4 years old, said to me a little while ago, he said, "Carrie Ma, I can't kiss you, I can't hug you because you're old." And then, of course, his mother goes, "What? Oh, no, what did you say to Carrie Ma?" And then he said, until the germ goes.
Bless.
So we've had it this staged, you know, and now, you know, he's got a little ear infection at the moment. And I said to him the other day, "Come here, I need to talk to your ears to tell them it's time to let that infection go so you can hear better." And he looked at me and he said, Oh, I've got an ear infection and I've got the drops too. And he said, "But it's not good. It's not good." Bless his soul. And the reason I share that with you is because we discount the social and emotional development of our kids as important. It's seen as soft. And what we're talking about are essential skills that really are crucial. They are crucial to a future that is going to be bumpy. It's going to be the Big Dipper ride, as far as I can work out. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think most of us realise that things, yes, we have to be a little bit more adaptable than we have been in the future.
And I mean, those sort of social skills, if I could just say something there, is that, when we're talking about, relationship, it's about, how do I, as in my interaction with other, how do I make them feel safe? Is my language respectful and dignified in my conversations with them? Is there a predictability in my personality? They're the similar ingredients that we sort of highlight when we're talking about a trauma-informed care approach. So I actually think that as leaders, even in leadership, it's about how do you translate that through your actions and through your being with staff? How do you surround yourself with staff that are willing to, be given tasks to delegate? Because I actually believe that schools have some wonderful creative teachers who often don't get, tapped on the shoulder and asked, could you show that for us? You've done this. Can you share that with us? And I think we need to look internal as well as external. So there's got to be a nice balance. And I've seen schools that have done that really, really well because the leadership has allowed that to happen. It's, because power with is far more effective than power over. That's critical.
Really, really nice distinction, Maurizio. In all of the organisational work that I do, small business, large business, education business, whatever, I often say to the leader or leaders, the answers to your problems are probably somewhere in your organisation. You haven't found that person or asked enough people.
And that's about voice, isn't it? That's about inclusion and voice and realising that together we actually have the answers. We can find different options, and if we don't fail at something, we're not learning, right? So
that's good. That's
we've got to fail. We've got to fail. Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation tonight. We've sort of done the movement around and around, but I've heard some great skills, some new thoughts and awareness around what it is that we could do collectively, not just leave it up to certain people to make the decisions, so to actually build our voice. Our thriving isn't easy the way I see things. It's about the way we can manage, the way we see it, and where those 1% or those small steps are that we have power over and that we can actually put into place. So Helen, if anyone would like to contact you for further conversation or to see the type of work that you do, get to know you a little bit better, what's your best contact?
The easiest one is my website, which is simply helenmack.com. So nice and easy to remember. I'm on LinkedIn as Helen Mack, and I'm on all the usual channels. I'm on Facebook, which we're streaming out on tonight. I'm Helen Mack Team Optimization. So if you look up Helen Mack, you might find me. But if you look up Optimization, you'll find me. I'd love to have a conversation with any of your listeners who'd like to optimize their outcomes. And on my website, you can book a time to do that, or you can also download some free resources.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Maurizio?
Very similar, actually. I have a website. It's mauriziovespa.com. You might get a few Vespa scooters that might appear in your spelling, but, you can't do anything. But when you've got a name like Vespa, you're bound to get a few of those sorts of things. But that's probably the best way. And look, I'm always open to working with, schools, organisations, social service organisations in particular as well. So, look, it's been wonderful actually meeting you, Helen. And
it's been great.
Carrie, thanks very much for bringing us together. I really had a great time. Even with the hat. Now I've got hat hair, so
We've all got hat hair. That's why you leave them on. Once you don't want to have hat hair. Carrie, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet Maurizio in the chat and to share with your audience. It's been just lovely. And I was just thinking, you were talking about thriving, and I think thriving and learning have a lot in common. They're both journeys, they're not destinations.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Helen. That's a great way to bring it all together for us. Listeners, great to have your company tonight, and as we do, we actually put this on our podcast as well, the Thriving Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about what I do, carriebenedette.com. Carry a bag. It's easy to remember, CARRIE. You know me. We'll always have a enlightening conversation. We're here all about you. Your thriving is precious, and so is the thriving of your families, your workmates, whoever it is that you know, your neighbours. We all are in this together. So let's flap our wings and make a little bit of a ripple that goes around the globe, wishing everybody the best way to thrive during the pandemic and what is next to happen. We don't know. But over to you. Thanks, everybody, for your company. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Maurizio. It's been an absolute delight. See you next Tuesday night, 7:30.
All the very best.
Bye for now.
Cheers.